If it's Wednesday, President Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy meet in the Oval Office for the first time in this new Congress amid major stalemates on debt spending, policing, the border, and more. Plus, remembering and celebrating the life of Tyre Nichols. Mourners are gathering in Memphis, Tennessee, including those who've lost loved ones to police brutality. And the vice president is there as well, as calls for police reform and justice for the 29-year-old grow. And the FBI executes another search for classified documents, this time at President Biden's private beach house in Delaware, as the administration is once again pressed for more transparency about what has been found and when they found it. Hello there. Welcome to Wednesday and welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Chuck Todd reporting from Washington, where at this hour, Speaker McCarthy and President Biden are meeting at the White House for the first time since Republicans took the majority in the House. There are a lot of important issues that should be on the table at this meeting, what this meeting should be about, perhaps police reform after the fatal beating of Tyre Nichols. Funeral is underway right now as we speak. Immigration, where according to our latest NBC News poll, it's the issue Americans want this new Congress to take up. The number one priority is this issue. But it is the issue of the debt ceiling, this manufactured crisis, that is expected to dominate the conversation in the Oval Office. And it's what's dominated the barbs being traded in the lead up to this meeting. Here's Speaker McCarthy this afternoon on his way to the White House.
The president did say that if you're going to come with a plan. So do you have a plan?
I got a big plan. The first question is, does the president want to continue reckless spending or find a way that we could be responsible, sit down, and find common ground where we put ourselves on a path to budget, make a balanced budget?
Folks, posturing aside, both McCarthy and Biden are coming into this meeting with pretty weak hands politically to play in different ways. For Speaker McCarthy, first off, it's not even clear he's sitting down at this meeting with full command over his caucus and its razor-thin majority. On top of that, he carries the weight of a skeptical public. According to our new NBC News poll, more Americans say it's congressional Republicans, not the president, who they expect to be too inflexible when dealing with one another. That's by a significant 54 to 45 margin, meaning basically partisans are on each side and independents are the ones that believe that the Republicans will be more intransigent. Our poll also found that congressional Republicans are even less popular than their Democratic counterparts by a double-digit margin, even as both parties have favorable ratings that are underwater. Neither party is liked. One party is disliked a bit more. But President Biden doesn't come into these talks with a particularly strong hand himself. In fact, we got another reminder of the legal and political headwinds facing him when the FBI conducted yet another search of another house for classified documents that belongs to Joe Biden. This time, they searched the Delaware Beach house. The president's lawyers and the Justice Department say no documents with classified markings were found. Still, despite promises of transparency from the president and his lawyers, we haven't gotten anything close to it. We still don't know the full number or the nature of what the classified material that was discovered during these searches of his home and office, or a decent explanation of how they got there. Bottom line, both Biden and McCarthy come into today's meeting with weak hands and political incentives to fight, not unite, which is unfortunate because there are actually many important issues that only divided government could probably address. Because if unified government could have done it, we would have had an immigration bill and we would have had a police reform bill. Mike Memley's outside the White House. Ali Vitale is on Capitol Hill for us. Mike, let me start with you. Look, the White House just agreeing to this meeting is seen by House Republicans as a victory. What does the White House make of that?
The White House makes of that is that President Biden is an institutionalist who is always going to have a meeting at some point during his presidency with the Speaker of his House, Speaker of the House, especially before the State of the Union address. And I'll tell you the other thing that the White House is sure of. They're sure that the politics are on their side on this issue of spending and deficits. They have had the president out since last year running against a Republican Congress, or at least specific members of the Republican Congress who have proposed things like sunsetting entitlement programs, Social Security, Medicare, who have proposed alternately cutting defense spending or raising defense spending. This is the divide within the Republican Party that the White House wants to exploit at every turn, especially on this debt fight. But here's the thing, Chuck. The members of Congress, the Republican Congress, has the political upper hand in this respect. they know that ultimately, if there is a default, people blame the president most of all, and that this president, just like President Obama in 2011, doesn't want this hanging around their neck as they run for re-election. And so, this is what makes this debt standoff here that much more problematic, because when ultimately both sides believe that the politics ultimately runs to their benefit, they don't see the same need to compromise. And while the White House is sure that the Republicans need to negotiate with themselves before he's willing to negotiate with them, for now they're going to try and hold to the high ground rhetorically, which is this should not be even a matter for discussion.
All right, but, you know, here's the look, and if you're the House Republicans, I don't blame them for going down this road. But it really does appear, when you look at the Republican study group demands, when you look at what others are saying, they're trying to negotiate with Vice President Joe Biden in 2011.
That's right.
They want spending caps. And they got it from Vice President Biden and Mitch McConnell back in the day. And it certainly seems as if that's where they think is where the Democrats are at a weak point here. Because, again, if it was good enough for Vice President Biden, why isn't it good enough for President Biden?
Well, Chuck, one of the other major differences here between 2011 and 2023 is the Bush tax cuts are more or less expired. They've been replaced by the Trump tax cuts. And so the sort of obvious revenue raiser that was always part of the discussions, whether it was Simpson Bowles, whether it was the debt discussions in 2011, are sort of off the table and moved beyond. And the idea of changing the Trump tax cuts is probably, as Ali can best summarize, off the table completely. It's remarkable the degree to which we're not even discussing the Trump tax rates anymore. But this larger issue, as you point out, the Republican Study Committee, a lot of their demands are not very specific. And that's why Biden's saying, show me your budget, I'll show you mine. He's pledged to do that in early March. Well,
let me turn the tables, Ali Vitale, from what you understand on the McCarthy side. I mean, they see these polls, right? They know that the swing district members are seeing these polls too, and that their side has very little credibility with the swing voter public.
But look, their swing district lawmakers are not the ones who are going to happily and merrily trigger a motion to vacate in the way that the more right-wing members of this conference would, because the more right-wing members of this can kind of thrive off the chaos politically at home, bucking the establishment of the party in a way that moderates can't. And so there can be fretting and brow furrowing from moderates, but at the end of the day, they're just kind of hoping that there's a deal that will be palatable enough to the rest of the House Republican conference that they'll be able to push forward on this. I know that the idea that Biden will meet with anybody is one that Mike has heard over and over again. I heard it during the campaign as well. But for McCarthy, what he wants to do is make this look like he is in a conversation. As much as he can make this seem like this is an ongoing and active negotiation, McCarthy can at least publicly present that he's winning. And I think when you look at the Republican Study Committee, you're right that there's nothing in there. It's like they've got inflation as a buzzword like three times in the bullet points.
They don't have a specific in there at all, other than caps.
Exactly.
That's all they have.
And that's the trap that Biden is trying to lay for McCarthy. So we'll see whose trap actually works. Is it the negotiating trap at the White House? Is it the negotiating trap on specifics? I don't know. But the only people that lose in this really is the American public, because this would be bad for everybody.
But Ali, I'm curious, can Kevin McCarthy really sort of never present a plan other than spending caps? And the reason I say that, it sounds like there are some rank-and-file Republicans. Dan Crenshaw apparently is telling people that he stood up and said, hey, get some specifics out there. I know there are a lot of genuine fiscal hawks. They're not many. It's an endangered species in both parties. But there's some real fiscal hawks that would like to put some things on paper, but leadership's petrified of that.
Yeah, because then that locks them into something, and that means that they actually have to substantively negotiate. And I think that that's one of the things that they're very much afraid of. So I don't know if in April we're going to end up seeing an actual plan on paper. I think the thing that I keep hearing about is, okay, are we going to go back and reset 2022 fiscal year spending numbers and only do it on the non-military discretionary items? If you really want to get like in the weeds of what we're talking about here, that's one thing that I've heard floated. But okay, that allows us to infer some of the numbers. But it doesn't mean that Republicans are actively putting them out there.
They're only dealing with 10% of the entire budget anyway.
Exactly.
Look, last question for you, Ali. We have the first, if January 3rd was the first day of school and everybody's trying to get to know their own classrooms, today with the first day of committee hearings, I guess.
Yeah.
And it sounds like we got some fireworks in a couple of committees. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, fireworks on a couple of committees in terms of just the organizing resolutions that they were putting together, in terms of are you able to have a really contentious debate over
guns,
the
right?
having of guns in one of these committee hearings. Yeah. And then, of course, we were also moving forward on the judiciary and oversight front. These were not sort of like the headline hearings, immigration and COVID, waste, fraud, and abuse on oversight. But nevertheless, these are the committees that we're going to be looking at most closely, because they're the ones who are trying to do the most investigating of the Biden administration and just kind of muddy the waters ahead of 2024.
Well, if you're stuck having to testify before some of these committees, it looks like the infighting between the members of these committees is going to get more attention than the questioning of the witnesses themselves. Mike Memoli, Ali Vitale, thank you both for getting us started. So we got negotiations on the debt ceiling. I guess you could say in theory have begun between the White House and Kevin McCarthy, though it stalled. Another Republican lawmaker was at the White House today on another issue, hoping to make progress on immigration. It's another contentious issue facing this Congress, and one arguably that it can only be tackled by divided government. This is not an issue that one party rule can solve. Joining me now is that lawmaker who was at the White House today. It's Republican Congressman Tony Gonzales of Texas. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Chuck.
So, look, I'm sure it's somebody's, I hope, past you what our polling showed. And what was fascinating, we laid out various issues this new Congress could tackle that seemed potential, whether it's climate change, abortion restrictions, things like that. A couple of different ways to tackle immigration. And the number one pick of our poll across the board was a compromise immigration bill that had border security priorities, path to citizenship with background checks. And that obviously very important there. The American public looks like they're further ahead than Congress. Is that fair to say?
You know, the American public may be onto something. And, you know, today is a good start. I think it's important to have dialogue. It's important to have serious conversations and see where that goes. In a divided government, there's no room for blaming other people. Like, we have to roll up our sleeves. This is, you know, campaigning is where you divide. Governing is where you unite. You know, I consider myself a governing conservative. There's many of us here on the Hill, and we can't just wait for leadership on all sides to solve things. It has to be from a ground-up approach, and I think there's an opportunity for rank-and-file members to do that.
The issue that broke up immigration in 2013 was essentially the order, right? The path to citizenship, the border security money. There are many conservatives who are like, look, I'm willing to discuss path to the citizenship after I know the border's secure. When you discuss, how would you best say, describe the sticking points with your White House meeting?
You know, Chuck, I represent 42% of the southern border, over 800 miles. Places like Uvalde, Del Rio, Eagle Pass, El Paso. My district has been at the epicenter of it. I always start with border security. You know, we can't talk about immigration reform unless we start with border security. Protecting our country from fentanyl and terrorists is extremely important. Now, when you talk about immigration, it's important to not have this anti-immigrant rhetoric. It's important to go, hey, how do we attract people that want to come and work and live the American dream? Maybe not pathway to citizenship or amnesty or some of these topics that drag us into nowhere fast. I think part of it is starting with sensible things and building it out from there.
So let me ask you about ending the COVID emergency, which would then end Title 42. You know, there's a couple there. I know there was a proposal out there to end Title 42, but make it a penalty if somebody came to the border, was sent back, they couldn't come back to the border and try to get in for 6 months or a year or something like that. What do you want a post-Title 42 world to look like? It's going to happen, we know that. What do you want that restriction to look like, and how do you want it implemented?
That's a great question, Chuck. And, you know, in a bipartisan manner, there have been both Democrats and Republicans that have said, hey, look, Title 42 is going to go away. We're okay with that. Just what are we going to transition to? Part of that is a front door, is essentially right now the immigration system is completely broken. How do you streamline it? How do you make it easier for people to come that warrant asylum, that want work visas? I think work visas solves a lot of this. You got to include the corporations as well, right? These employers, they have to have buy-in. These are some things that I think are sensible. We start there, we build out the conversation, but it has to start on border security.
Speaking of border security, today, Congressman Andy Biggs is introducing articles of impeachment against the Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas. Where do you stand on that? And do you think that's an effective way to try to enhance border security?
Yeah, Chuck, Secretary Mayorkas is a very popular guy in the Republican Party, as you can imagine.
I am aware.
There's no doubt that we're going to have impeachment hearings. I want to see all the facts. You know, let's not come to conclusions until we have all the facts. And wherever the facts take us, the facts take us. But, you know, rhetoric is one thing. I'm in a district that needs solutions. I'm in a district that needs help today, not 10 years from now. So I think it's important that we come with real solutions.
The problem I just don't understand is, like, he's an appointee of President Biden. So if you have a beef with him, take it to the top.
I know. And, you know, the other part of it is only one time in our nation's history has a secretary ever been impeached. So it's going to take a lot of time, effort, energy. And to me, I think that takes it away from some of the other things that are happening. But there's no doubt impeachment hearings are going to take place. But we have to see where that leads us.
It doesn't sound like you're a no on it, though.
I mean, we haven't even started the hearings yet. If I come out with a yes or no, I think that's, I mean, I'm no attorney, but it seems like that's bad optics to come up with a conclusion before you even start the trial. Then that makes it political. This can't be political. This has to be about policy, and the American people have to come first.
Are you saying the introduction of these articles of impeachment is not political?
Well, I think what we've seen is impeachment has been this word that is thrown around like it's candy. I mean, this used to be a case of emergency break glass, and now everybody is going to that hammer in the first tool out of the toolbox. Yeah. I just think we need to pump the brakes and go, all right, let's have these hearings. Let's see where it takes us. But at the same time, the American public demand tangible results.
You luckily don't have the scar tissue of what so many other people that have been in Congress for a decade have. And you're right about these tools. Speaking of a tool that's getting used more frequently, stripping members of committee assignments. Where do you stand on this with Ilhan Omar?
You know, this was a tough one because I didn't appreciate the precedents that Democrats set when they stripped away some committees from Republicans' last committee or last Congress. I don't really like the fact that we're going down this route, this tit for tat. At the end of the day, you know, I think it's probably the right thing to do per se. But I want us to get to real problems. You know, we can't be stuck in this, hey, you called me this, you did this. American public demand real solutions. School safety, education, healthcare, border immigration. These are real problems that we need to tackle.
Why do you think it's the right thing to do to kick her off that committee? Is it that committee specifically?
I mean, look, at the end of the day, she's done a lot of things. She said a lot of things. I get that. You know, maybe this is a way to prevent other members from going down that road. You know, look, it's ugly all the way around. I'm not excited about this is the energy that we're taking. But at the same time, I mean, my focus right now is on the border, immigration, these type of things. And you got to make sure that, you know, there's only so much political capital you can use.
Wise words there. Well, like I said, the American public, they're ready for a grand bargain on immigration. Let's see if you guys can fulfill what they want. Congressman Tony Gonzales, Republican from South Texas, thanks for coming on, sharing your perspective with us.
Thank you, Chuck.
Coming up,
yes, sir.
Tyre Nichols is being remembered right now. Family members, civil rights activists, federal officials are all mourning his death in Memphis. They're also renewing a call for justice. Meanwhile, the FBI searches President Biden's beach house as members of Congress demand more transparency from the Justice Department and the White House about the classified material found during this investigation. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. It's been an emotional afternoon in Memphis, Tennessee. Family, friends, activists, politicians have all gathered to honor and mourn Tyre Nichols, a 29-year-old man who died days after he was beaten by 5 former Memphis police officers during a traffic stop last month. Nichols was remembered today as a loving son and father, an avid skateboarder and photographer. The Vice President, Kamala Harris, was in attendance, as were others who lost loved ones in incidents of police brutality, including members of Eric Garner, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd's family. Vice President Harris spoke briefly at the service, calling for Congress to pass police reform.
This is a family that lost their son and their brother through an act of violence at the hands and the feet of people who had been charged with keeping them safe. As Vice President of the United States, we demand that Congress pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Joe Biden will sign it. And we should not delay, and we will not be denied. It is non-negotiable.
Ellison Barber is on the ground for us in Memphis. And Ellison, Benjamin Crump noted the cruel coincidence, I don't know what else to call it, that Breonna Taylor and Tyre Nichols that didn't just share a birthday, they were born on the same day.
Yeah, there were constant reminders today in this service of something that Black Americans know all too well, that Tyre's story, Breonna's story, it's happened to a lot of families in this country. They share a birthday. Their families now share this unfortunate bond that they both lost their children at the hands of police officers. In Breonna Taylor's case, she was just trying to sleep in her home. In Tyre Nichols' case, what he said to police officers when he was being beaten on the ground was, "I'm just trying to go home." Today, his mother made reference to the fact that he is going home in a different way, in a way that his family never wanted to happen. But they are determined, they say, to make sure that his death leads to real and long-lasting change. Multiple times throughout this service, we heard family members, we heard politicians, we heard leaders in this community, reverends, calling on Congress, the federal government, to do something specifically to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And we heard that directly from Tyre's mother as well. Listen to what she said.
The only thing that's keeping me going is the fact that I really truly believe my son was sent here on an assignment from God. No other child that should suffer the way my son and all the other parents here have lost their children. We need to get that bill passed. Amen. Because if we don't, that blood, the next child that dies, that blood is going to be on their hands.
And the family's attorney, Ben Crump, said that he hopes, he believes part of Tyre's legacy will be equal justice swiftly. We know those 5 officers allegedly involved in at least the second scene, the most egregious video evidence we have seen of Tyre Nichols being beaten, hit with the baton. They have all been charged. They face a number of charges, including second-degree murder. The DA has said the investigation here is still ongoing, and it's possible that other officers who were at that second scene, other first responders, and also officers who had been identified as being involved in some capacity at the first initial stop, that they could potentially see some sort of charges down the road. But that's something that came with a lot of noise from activists here saying, hey, pay attention to this. Hey, we want answers. But Ben Crump and others have said, compared to other instances like this of police brutality, they feel that the DA here and the police department moved fairly quickly in dealing with charging and firing at least those 5 core officers. Chuck.
Ellison Barber outside the church for today's service. Ellison, thank you. I'm joined now by Paul Henderson. He's the Executive Director of San Francisco's Department of Police Accountability. Paul, really appreciate you coming on here. And I want to pick up on where Ellison left off. Because when I think about covering way too many of these stories, and we talk about the different reform ideas that have been out there, in many ways, everything that could be done on the local level here had been done. This is a police department that looks like the community that it's serving. This is a police chief that acted swiftly, quickly, didn't hide behind the bureaucracy of a police union. We had all of the local justice act swiftly. Body camera footage is on there. We want more departments to do that. And yet it still happened. So what should Congress take away from that? That all of these local reforms happened in this case, and we still had the same outcome.
Yeah, and I would say that there is 2 things that they should take away from it. The first thing that they should take away from it is that you can't just have reform without accountability. You have to have both. And without both, you still get these bad results. Because we did have a policy in Memphis for disengagement and de-escalation. We did have a policy in Memphis for officers to intervene on behalf of a third party. And we didn't have that. But what we do have, and I think this is the glaring outline of what needs to happen, is the national policy that everyone is talking about today that needs to happen with the George Floyd Act. That needs to happen because realistically, and I think this is the part that gets missed in these conversations, more than 2/3 of all law enforcement agencies in this nation still don't even have updated use of force policies. And so that means by default that every day through adoptive admission, any law enforcement agency can have cases like Breonna Taylor, can have cases like George Floyd, can have cases like Tyre Nichols and Eric Garner. And that could happen at any time without a national policy, again, that defines both reform and accountability. Some of the things that we're seeing that have been taken, the steps that have been taken to have law enforcement respond appropriately and quickly is fantastic, but we need to have policies in place that address the concerns that we have specifically for communities of color and the race disparate outcomes from law enforcement. That needs to be addressed immediately.
Look, the fact that we had 5 African-American police officers be the ones that conducted this beating, does this not scream that this is an institutional and cultural issue within police departments?
Well, it confirms immediately that diversity is not the sole issue in cases like this. What it confirms for me is that the blue uniform of the office overshadows the black skin of the officers. And that's why we already know that law enforcement has race disparate outcomes. And that is very race specific, and we have to focus on that. That is the issue that's not up for debate. We have proven statistically over and over again, beyond the anecdotal conversations from communities of color, that there are race disparities in policing and stops and use of force and arrests all across the board. That's been proven. Part of the confirmation of that can be looked at. You can see the solutions in states like California that has the RIPA Act, where officers are forced to record their interactions by race. Because if you do that, you can confirm it in any local area. So we already know that these things are true and not up for debate. The real issue is, what do we do once we have confirmed race disparities? How do we address it? And again, the answer are reform policies and accountability. We need both, and we need a standard that goes at a local level, at a state level, and is confirmed at a federal level. I'm excited about some of the movement that we're seeing at the federal level with the Biden and Harris administration and some of the steps that they're taking, and what the DOJ is doing uniquely for the first time, where we see them acting quickly and swiftly about an investigation and an indictment for behaviors, especially because, you know, it's a separate track of accountability from the state or local accountability from the district attorney. We need all of that to be codified and institutionalized to address this problem.
All right, let me very quickly get you out on this. If this Congress is as divided as we think it is, and they could only do one thing to improve policing in America, what is that one thing?
Codify the JIPA Act, codify George Floyd, address the Senate Republicans, because I want to be clear as to why it didn't move forward last time. The Senate Republicans blocked it from moving forward, mostly caught up over qualified immunity. But it's those types of restrictions that create unsafety, that confirm race disparate outcome from law enforcement for the rest of the country. And it has to be talked about and articulated in that way so that the country understands the need for us to have a better, more equitable definition of both public safety and justice in this country.
Well, you just hit the key there. All of us, including us in the media, we need to help explain the race disparity outcome. That is something that I think we do better today than we did yesterday, but we could do a lot better. Paul Henderson, thanks for coming on and sharing your expertise. Appreciate it. Up next, the FBI descends on President Biden's beach house as Congress and the Justice Department continue to spar over access to the classified material and matters of national security that were uncovered. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Today, a spokesperson for the White House counsel's office addressed reporters on camera for the first time since we first learned that classified documents had been found at President Biden's D.C. office, an office he occupied before he was president. Ian Sams answered questions outside of the White House this afternoon.
I'm just not going to be able to speak to the underlying contents of what the Justice Department may be looking at as part of their ongoing investigation. But look, I'll say again, as they move forward with this investigation, the president, his attorneys, the White House certainly are going to be fully cooperative with that. We're following their lead to ensure that they have what they need in order to conduct a thorough review.
It came hours after the FBI searched the president's Delaware beach house as part of its investigation into classified documents. The president's personal attorney says, and a law enforcement official has now confirmed to NBC News that no documents marked classified were actually found at the president's Delaware beach house. It is notable because the White House has not said that about the searches at either Biden's personal residence or his former office. And we still don't have a full accounting of how many documents have been found, nor their classification levels. All of this comes as Congress and the Justice Department appear headed toward a showdown over access to these documents as lawmakers try to assess what kind of risk they could have posed to national security. Source told NBC News that the Senate Intelligence Committee, which is run by Democrats, is weighing all options, including subpoenas to force DOJ to comply with their request. Ryan Nobles has been covering those developments in Capitol Hill for us. Also with me is our NBC News correspondent, Julia Ainsley, who covers the Justice Department. So, Ryan, let me start with you. Mark Warner and Marco Rubio have been sort of jointly working together, and I thought Marco Rubio made a really important point, which is they've probably already seen these documents. They just haven't seen them through the frame of these were the documents found at Trump's house and at Biden's house and at Pence's house.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, Chuck. The Senate Intelligence Committee has a wide range of access to all kinds of classified information that comes in and out of the federal government on a regular basis. So it's true that there's a very good chance that they may have seen this information, but they haven't seen it in this context. And what the Department of Justice is concerned about is that you have three very prominent political figures, all three of which could play in the 2024 campaign in some way, shape, or form. And if too much information is shared with political actors, regardless of the level of access that they have to classified information, there's always that risk that it could get out into the public domain and then damage their investigation in some way, shape, or form. Now, I have to tell you, Chuck, the leaders here in Congress just aren't buying that. They believe that their oversight extends beyond whatever concerns there may be about politics, especially as it relates to national security. And so they're going to have to try and find some sort of compromise which gets them the information that they need to perhaps change policy, to write laws that would prevent this from happening again, but then at the same time doesn't interfere with that investigation. They haven't come to that place yet, but there is hope that they'll get there eventually.
Is Mark Warner ready to do a subpoena?
So, what they've said to us is that they're not in threat mode yet, is how they described it. Chuck, both Rubio and Warner described it as such. But, our sources directly connected to the committee have said very specifically that nothing is off the table yet, and that includes subpoenas. And so this is something the committee is definitely holding as an option should things get more contentious. Senator Rubio also made it clear that they hold the purse strings here. They appropriate the budget of the Department of Justice, so they have that power as well. They don't want it to get too confrontational at this point, but they've made it clear they're not taking any options off the table.
I got Julia Ainsley here, who covers the Justice Department. So, Julia, I had Rod Rosenstein. He had said, look, he wouldn't cooperate with when he was a Republican, he wouldn't cooperate with the Republican Judiciary Committee. They're not going to cooperate with Congress on here, but are they aware that a subpoena is coming? I mean, it does feel like that's where we're headed.
Yeah, it feels like they're being incredibly careful, and you wonder if that is because they want the message to be carefully crafted to the public, like we saw today outside the White House, or because they are scared of real legal ramifications. One of the reasons, you could maybe call it an excuse, that we heard over and over again from the White House counsel's office today was that they would not tell, including our reporter, Peter Alexander, if there have been other searches of other residents or offices of the president.
So why'd they tell us about this one?
Because we had cameras showing cars pulling up to that residence today. And I think that has to be pointed out, that this isn't, we aren't finding out about this because of this.
They didn't do it on the goodness of their heart.
Yeah, this incredibly transparent administration.
We have stakeout cameras there.
Right, and we have that because we now know about this investigation. But for months we didn't. The media didn't know until January, even though the Biden administration would have known in November. And so now we know about it because this came to light and we're able to position our resources.
How does the Justice Department explain taking pictures of what they found at Mar-a-Lago and not taking pictures of what they found at, this is at the heart of the complaints about equal treatment?
I think that's a hard one for them to get around, and they're answering fewer questions than the White House is right now. I will point out that today, Robert Hur got up and going. The special counsel's office is now in position. I don't know if it's a coincidence that we saw this search today of the Rehoboth
on the day he starts.
Beach House on the day he starts. His website goes up. He's got the trucks rolling in. But I think that now he will have to show, is he going to treat this investigation the same way that his counterpart, Jack Smith, is treating the investigation into Mar-a-Lago and other Trump problems?
And I still have not gotten a clear understanding of why Hunter Biden's investigation is not with Mr. Hur and the special counsel. And the reason I ask that is because, again, I go to the rationale Merrick Garland used for creating the special counsels. And the rationale he used for both, right? Once he started one, he had no choice with the other. And then he lumped in another investigation into the Jack Smith special counsel. How do you justify keeping the Hunter Biden thing out of a special counsel now?
I think that's a great question. One reason he said he established a special counsel in the Biden case is because the U.S. attorney in the Northern District of Illinois was leaving, perhaps the Hunter Biden thing is already along the tracks. That's about all I can come up with. I'm not them, but yeah.
I get the sort of the technical explanation. What does it look like?
Especially as questions around these documents, especially from Republicans, start to connect back to whether or not Hunter Biden had access. And we start to ask more about who had access to these residences at that time that the documents were there.
We're going to probably find out that these documents aren't that big of a deal, but they're making it seem like a bigger deal.
Yeah, that's true.
The way they're acting. Julia Inslee, Ryan Nobles before that. Thank you both. After the break, the 2024 presidential race is really actually starting to ramp up. Another candidate that's actually going to jump in, former Governor Nikki Haley, is ready to go. Day after Valentine's, she's jumping in. The first person to challenge the only other announced Republican candidate, Donald John Trump. You're watching Meet the Press now. Donald Trump's 2024 plans impact your 2024 plans?
I have said that if President Trump runs, I will not run.
There it was. That was Nikki Haley on Meet the Press all the way back in 2022. But in 2023, she's changed her tune. Haley asked supporters to join her for, quote, a special announcement on February 15th. And plenty of sources are telling NBC News former governor of South Carolina is indeed gearing up for a presidential run in 2024. Haley, who served as ambassador to the United Nations in the Trump administration, has both praised and criticized the former president since leaving office. But this announcement would put her squarely at odds with Trump, who is currently the only Republican candidate for president. Joining me now is our panel. Meredith McGraw, national political correspondent at Politico. Cornell Belcher, a Democratic pollster and NBC News political analyst. And Sarah Chamberlain, the CEO of the Republican Main Street Partnership. Meredith, I'll start with you. We were doing a little pregame here. Just wanted to sort of test my premise here. I think of all the first people to jump in and be sort of the first person with Trump, this is the most complicated first candidate for Trump to deal with, and Nikki Haley.
Yeah, she is going to be complicated for him. I was traveling with the former president over the weekend on his plane.
I
was on that trip, and we asked him about Haley and the prospect of her getting in. He talked about a phone call that she made with him last week, and he told her that, you know, if you want to get in, if your heart's in it, do it. He didn't seem to be showing that he thinks that she's going to be much of a threat. But I think you are right. This is going to be a complicated candidate for him. She worked under him as his UN ambassador. She's very well liked in her home state of South Carolina, which when she launches there on February 15th, you know, that's a sign of just how important she thinks that state's going to be to her own success.
I want to update folks. Kevin McCarthy and Joe Biden have just finished their meeting. Kevin McCarthy is talking to reporters outside at what we call the Sticks. They're outside of the West Wing entrance. Whatever news he makes, we will share it with you in a few minutes. Sarah, what also interests me is there was always an upside to being the first one out of the gate after Trump. And I know the Pence folks made the decision they weren't going to do that for obvious reasons, and I think that they weren't a good next. But, you know, you're Chris Sununu, you're Asa Hutchinson, you're Larry Hogan. Are you going, oh, shoot, we blew it?
Actually, I think you probably are.
Yeah.
Because I think she's going to get a lot of press. I think people are going to like, oh, we have an option besides Trump. This is good. And, yeah, I think they blew it, to be honest. And she's going to be tough. I would not take her lightly if I was Donald Trump.
You know, Cornell, I look at it as, it's funny, you know, the media gets exhausted from covering presidential announcements. So the first one or two are of interest. No, I'm just saying Nikki Haley's going to get a lift. And I think of Asa Hutchinson, who, if he'd been the first one in, he'd probably get more coverage than he will at any other time. I just think that it's a small race to being the next person. But I think this is another strategic way Nikki Haley is being pretty smart here.
Well, look, I'm going to not be partisan at all. I'm just going to be a political hack, straight up the middle here. Nikki Haley's in this race now early because she needs to be. That's right. She needs a longer race than some of the others. And if you look at where she is right now look, we talked about this before, as a pollster, all the primary polls out right now aren't worth the paper they're printed on. That said, Chuck, she's at the bottom, right? So she does need a longer ramp here than those other candidates do. But ultimately, the question is there a lane for the Jeb Bush, Kasich wing of the party? And I think in the end, does she outperform what we've seen that wing perform in the last go around in the primary? I think she has a very difficult road ahead of her when you look at what sort of policies Youngkin is doing and what the Florida governor is doing right now. I think she has a long road ahead of her, but she's got a chance.
Look, we were talking about, if you look at the party by education, Sarah, you know this better than most. 2/3 of the party is non-college educated voters, but a third of them are the college educated voters. That was the John Kasich. We can laugh all you want at the Kasich fact that he didn't in the nomination, but there's 30 to 35% of the potential vote sitting there.
Absolutely.
If she's claiming 10 to 15% of this, that's not good for Ron DeSantis, is it?
It is not good for him.
Yeah.
And also, it's not good for that wing of the party because if you get 2 or 3 people in there, they're going to split that 35%.
If you could get one, then maybe they could be the nominee.
Exactly. Right? That's exactly what I was going to say. But Trump could end up getting his 30% and beating all of them. It's going to be a fascinating 2024.
Is that explain why he was sort of almost welcoming her into the race?
Yeah, I think Trump and his advisors, they know that the more Republicans get into this race, the better off it's going to be for him and his own chances.
So Kevin McCarthy didn't break a lot of news. He basically said, we had a great discussion. We can find common ground. We hope to come to an agreement long before the deadline, and I'm not going to negotiate this in the press. So pretty much exactly.
Okay.
But, I do think, Meredith, we shouldn't underestimate personal rapport. And Boehner and Obama had it awkwardly, but they really did have it. And I do think McCarthy, his instinct is to be more like Biden. He's kind of a backslapper guy. He's not good at being a hardline ideologue, and he's trying to play one, but I don't know if he's going to pull that off.
Well, we'll see if he's able to. I mean, he's going to have to make some sort of deal here. I mean, we're staring 5 months away from very serious economic ramifications if they can't get this done.
What is realistic? Do you think the party is going to unite around caps? They can't unite around specifics, so they unite around guardrails?
Probably. That's probably exactly where we're going to end up going. Republican Main Street Partnership members, I think, want to go there. And there are 90, there's 90 strong of them. But they do want to see something. They don't want to just increase it without some cuts someplace, but not Social Security or Medicare.
So, I mean, we're only talking about 8 to 10% of the budget when you start everything that they keep taking off the table.
But it's a talking point, and it's success. It is.
I love you, Sarah. You're being honest.
Right.
I love it. No, it is what it is.
And would you like to save 8 to 10%? I mean, it's better than nothing.
It's the question is whether we can actually encourage a real budget process. Because then you would have, okay, you want this? How are you going to pay for it?
But that's
a different
great? But that's a different conversation. It becomes a political conversation. To me, at some point, they're trying to extort themselves to a victory around some ideological issues that they know they can't get through the regular political process. Look. The cuts that you want, they didn't run on any cuts in the last election. I watched all the commercials. It was crime and the border. So which by the way, things that cost money, fighting more crime and more border security. But put forward what you in fact want to cut, and you're right, the math isn't there, and you're right, the math isn't there. If we want to talk about really sort of making dramatic cuts here, you're going to have to touch Social Security and Medicare. You're going to have to touch military. You just are. So put them forward and let the American people hear it.
Bull Simpson almost had Paul Ryan and Barack Obama in the same place.
Yes. Yeah.
And we're not anywhere close to Bull Simpson.
Yeah. No.
Not even close.
But that fell apart.
It did. It did fall apart.
Meredith, what should we make of the fact that it does look like Kevin McCarthy is going to get his vote on Ilhan Omar? I mean, he seems to be cutting deals to get whatever 3 or 4 votes he needs. Why is that so important to him?
It's a great question. I mean, I think with Ilhan Omar, it's a way for him to put sort of nail a head to the wall, somebody who the party has just vilified in every possible way. And she's spoken to that. She said, you know, she's a Muslim, she's a woman, she's a person of color, and, you know, she is now having to pay the consequence of that.
It does feel, Sarah, it does feel as if what Republicans said Democrats were starting. Mm-hmm. They're going ahead and go. I mean, there's no clean hands.
No, but I'm going to defer with you a little bit. She has said some things that are really inappropriate. She probably shouldn't be on that committee.
Any more or less than Marjorie Taylor Greene? I mean, like, that's the point. Like, how do you compare?
But that's such an important committee. Maybe she could sit on a different committee. I understand where the Republicans are coming from, and I understand where Kevin's coming from on this one.
What's wrong with having diversity of opinion on that committee of all committees?
She just is out there. I mean, some of the comments she makes are really too extreme for the Republicans to handle.
It's united the Democratic Party on her in a way that hadn't happened before.
No, it certainly hasn't. But it's also, look, it's politics, right? It's playing to your base politics. She's an easy target. To your point, she's a Muslim.
Makes cable news happy.
It makes
one of the 2 cable news channels.
It makes Fox, yeah, you know, giddy.
Yeah.
So it's playing politics, but it is a slippery slope. I mean, you're right. This is a slippery slope because what happens when Democrats do take back the House?
I just feel like that whatever new guardrail we're all coming up with, well, that's inappropriate. That's inappropriate.
Yeah, we keep moving the lines here.
But the Democrats did it to the Republicans.
I mean, that's my point.
Right.
We're going to go down a road that we're all not going to like.
Yes.
I think we're down that road already. I'm ending on a light note. Meredith, Sarah. Tom Brady. There. Okay. All right. Fine. We'll say that. I think there's only, you know, who lasts longer, Tom Brady's retirement or Kevin McCarthy's speakership?
Oh, God.
I know. We'll see. Up next, what the Fed's decision to hike interest rates again means for the economy, the housing market, and Wall Street, and you. And if it's Wednesday, we've got a new episode of the Chuck Toddcast. It's the NBC political unit that dominates this podcast. Mark Murray, Bridget Bowman, Dante Cini. We take a deep dive in the latest NBC News poll. We talk a lot about Nikki Haley and 2024. Get it wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be right back. Welcome back. For the 8th time this year, in a year, if you will, the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates. The Fed announced a quarter-point increase today. It is the smallest rate hike since this string of rate hikes began last March, as inflation appears to be slowing down a bit. The chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, told reporters today additional rate hikes would likely be coming in the coming months because while inflation has slowed, it has not slowed enough. NBC News business reporter and data reporter Brian Chung joins me now. So, Brian, I guess that's the takeaway here is this is not the last rate hike.
Not at all. And what we heard from the Fed chairman is that they will likely have further rate hikes down from here. But we have to remember that they were hiking by about 0.5 percentage point in the last meeting in December. They were moving by 0.75 percentage point for multiple meetings last year. And all these interest rate hikes are to deliberately slow this economy to take inflation down. So them making those hikes smaller does show some optimism on the inflation front. For what it's worth, we remember the pace of inflation was about 9% in the middle of last year. It was down to 6.5% as of the last reading. But where the Fed needs it to be is 2%. The question is unemployment going to have to rise? That's the risk the Fed runs.
I was just going to say, and it seems to be this labor market is as hot as ever. Every survey seems to think this issue is we don't have a big enough labor force, isn't it?
Yeah, even this morning, right, we got information on the amount of job openings in this country. It actually nudged up, which was not what economists expected, to 11 million. So there are a lot of job openings, and the unemployment rate, as a reminder, 50-year low of 3.5%. But keep in mind, economists even within the Federal Reserve expect that number to go up to 4.6% by the end of this year. That would represent about 1.8 million people losing their jobs from right now.
I understand that, but I grew up in the days where 5% was considered full employment. What is that number these days?
Well, it's going to depend on which economist you're talking to, but by and large, it seems like right now, whoever wants a job is able to get one. Not in every sector. Take a look at tech, for example. True. So your mileage is going to vary. But look, broadly speaking, 3.5% is something we have not seen in a very long time.
Jobs are available. May not be exactly what you want, but they're out there. Brian Chung, partner over at CNBC. Brian, thank you. And thank you all for being with us this hour. I'll be back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. The news, though, continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.